Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to those of you who are on the East Coast time zone. I just wanted to begin by asking all of you a question. Have you ever received an email in your inbox at your campus address that just really made your day? Well, back in April, I received an email, which really, it both surprised me and delighted me at the same time. It began this way. Hi, Dr. Reitzel. I just saw a video of your presentation on YouTube. And I started thinking, what video presentation on YouTube? And I realized that the individual was talking about a presentation I did for Open Education Week 2023, where I talked about how to use LibreTexts with students, and specifically 3 different populations of students. So I was amazed that somebody outside of our realm, because this was a student type person, was looking at these YouTubes. So Delmar and Jennifer and Josh, LibreTexts is famous. What can I say when students are emailing you about it? And he went on to say it was great and helpful. And he said a big thank you. And why was this important to me? Well, first of all, he was from Pelican Bay State Prison. That is one of the student populations that I teach, and I use my LibreTexts OER with my Pelican Bay State Prison students. What's even more surprising to me, he hadn't been my student, but because Pelican Bay State Prison I've been using the text a bit with my teaching of interpersonal communication at the prison, the word got out about the class and the materials that were getting used and the materials that were really becoming quite popular. And the reason I wanted to say how delighted I was, first of all, to be recognized by a Pelican State, a former Pelican State incarcerated inmate, because he had done reentry at this point, but the fact that it was shared among the prisoners there at the institution. So I was really, really delighted and pleased by that. So this morning, I want to go ahead and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, Jennifer, you'll be able to see my PowerPoint. Let me know if you don't see it. I'm going to assume no news is good news. Here we go. I'm going to do a presentation today talking about student success stories thanks to LibreTexts. And I want to tell you, I'm a real firm believer in LibreTexts, and it's not just me, it's my students as well. During this presentation, which is going to be very brief, so hang on to your hats here, people. I'm going to talk about 3 different student populations that I've used the OER with. I'm going to focus in on only 2 of the major assignments. So I'm not going to talk about quizzes, writing their own test questions, scaffolded peer discussions. I'm going to focus in on 2 specific assignments that I tailor-made to work with LibreTexts. And that's going to lead me from 3 to 1 big yes to student success. So the first population that I used this with was correctional education students at Pelican Bay State Prison. And this was offered through College of the Redwoods for the Pelican Bay Scholars Program. Some of you might be familiar with some of the famous inmates that were there in the past. Charles Manson was one. Another one was Suge Knight. I just heard about him again on the news this morning. But the modality was something that I had not done for decades. The modality for the prison at that time, it was also during COVID time as well, was correspondence. Inmates received the OER in a copied form, and they completed their assignments on handwritten pieces of paper, which were then scanned and then emailed to me. So my gosh, most of you are probably too young to remember this, but this is how I used to teach back in the 70s and 80s. So it was a walk down memory lane at this point. But that was the first population that I started using the OER with. I had 2 other populations that I've used the same OER with, and this is community college students at our local community college, College of the Redwoods. The modality was online asynchronous. And the other group that I used was this past spring, university students at a Cal State University, Cal Poly Humboldt, and it was an online synchronous course. Now, the Comp 7 at College of the Redwoods was mainly for first-year students. The students who ended up taking it, even though it's a Comp 213, most of those students were juniors and seniors, And the majority of them were communication majors taking the course. So you can see I had 3 very different populations: incarcerated prisoners, back to the correspondence mode, online asynchronous community college, and then online synchronous university students. And so this is something to think about when you are using LibreTexts. How can you best fit LibreTexts to your population and the way that you're teaching it? I think that's one of the beauties of LibreTexts. It's really, it's one that you can modify. And so it's great that way. Very quickly, I'm not going to read through all this, don't worry. The slides are available for you to look at later. I was using an OER that I was one of the many co-authors. There were multiple co-authors of this text: Interpersonal Communication, Context, and Connection. And you can find this on LibreTexts. The students really liked the OER, not only because it was free, which of course they loved, but as you can see there, they liked the writing style. Things were manageable in the sections in LibreTexts. They really liked that. Because it was a recent text and could be modified, there were timely examples. The authors, many of us, used narratives, our stories, and students connected with those stories. We took time and effort to really think about diversity and inclusivity of people in the visuals and in the examples that we used. And the students absolutely loved the acronyms for remembering key principles and definitions. So there was a lot that we put into writing the OER, and the students really, it resonated with the students. It's important to remember that. So, and again, I'm watching time. The first assignment that I want to go into a little more detail on is one that I created originally for Pelican Bay State Prison students. That's because, again, no internet with these students. It's what I called the 3R essays: read, reflect, report. And I used these essays where students would read a module. They would read a module, they'd read something from LibreTexts. Then they would pick out 2 specific quotations. They had to show me where they found it within that chapter. They had to tell me about it. Then they had to translate it so that somebody, maybe their cellie, how would you explain this to your cellie, your cellmate? They had to do that, and then they had to apply it to themselves. Why did this resonate with them? Why did they pick this up? I started doing that over the course with another OER, but I used it also with this OER as well. And it worked wonders. Like I said, the students really got into, they were interacting with the book. They were picking out what they thought was important. They had some control over what they would share with me. And I think they really appreciated that. So then I modified this, even though I was teaching fully online, one asynchronous, one synchronous, with my university students at College of the Redwoods and at Cal Poly Humboldt. Then I used them as a stepping stone for a bigger assignment that I want to show you some examples of. So again, you can see scaffolding. I found it so easy to do with the LibreTexts. So I encourage you to really think about that in teaching. So the learning outcomes, I won't spend a lot of time. I kind of went over this already, but I want to draw your attention to the bottom bullet here. To apply the concepts that they chose to their own experiences or observations, or to an article, a song, or a video. I wanted to include that too, in case something connected for them outside the realm of personal experience. Some students may not be comfortable at the beginning of a semester sharing so much personal information. Now, again, it's interpersonal communication, so it tends to have students self-disclosing things. But I want to, again, comfortable for students to do their essays. The idea, though, was use the LibreTexts. Then I went into another project for my university students and my College of the Redwoods students. This was so exciting. I have to tell you, I was so excited. I was sitting on pins and needles. I didn't know if it was going to work, but I was really hoping it would. Where students would take 2 of their 3R essays, 2 of the essays they wrote about a couple of the chapters in the book, and use those articles as the starting point for an interpersonal communication magazine. And the idea of the magazine was, this would be a popular magazine, one maybe you pick up when you're standing in line at the express lane in the grocery store, or one that you read online, but it would be a magazine devoted to certain concepts they had read about in LibreTexts. And then it would be a popular magazine that would be written in such a way that somebody who was not in the class would understand those concepts. So there was a lot of communication going around. They had to take content, use the content, decipher the content, modify it for an audience, and then publish it. So you can imagine my students, many of them, I'll be honest, were scared. They had never, ever done anything like this before. And I don't know if you've noticed, but students love doing things that they've already got down pat. They go through the motions. This was something new. So it did cause some discomfort until they actually started to do it. So, whoa, I had a lot of objectives, a lot of things for students to do. At Cal Poly Humboldt, they created an e-zine, a magazine. They had to construct a cover, table of contents. Then they had to give feedback to each other in their small groups. They had to give an oral presentation to the class on this. And then they had to evaluate some of the other presentations so that students would get that feedback about their e-zines. There was a lot involved with this. What was really cool for me is students were using the material. So right here on this page, I put in an example of communication climate. This is something I constructed, and then how I constructed the table of contents. I wanted to give them a starting point. So I created this. It did not take long. If any of you know Canva, without the S at the end, Canva, wonderful, wonderful tool to use in creating images. In fact, I always do my Zoom backgrounds using Canva. So that was what I shared with students. So I got permission from some of my students to share what they did. And I'm just going to go through this very briefly with you. You can see this later on the PowerPoint that is going to be uploaded. This is coming from a student who did interpersonal communication, listening, and climate, 2 of the chapters in the textbook. And her meme, she decided to do a full page on her meme. And again, she used Canva. Here are 2 examples from 2 different students, Josue and Joshua, what their table of contents looked like. And again, I didn't want to dictate exactly carbon copy forms. They could use their own creativity with the cover and the table of contents. But you'll see here, this is from a community college student. If you look within this article, you'll see there's very specific references to LibreTexts in it, which I was really pleased with. So it was like they're explaining the material to others. So here's one, another one, and you can see the big differences in how students put this together. What I need to tell you really quickly is I didn't require students to do any kind of graphics on the pages of the articles. I made it easier for them. But you know what happened? They saw some other students' magazines. They got so excited that they went ahead and did the entire magazine like a magazine. So they went above and beyond. There were only maybe out of the 2 classes, only 2 students who followed my directions and simply had articles like the old-fashioned, just plain old essay without the visuals. So they themselves got excited about it. This is a great one. I talked about how so much of our communication takes place around the dinner table. So I told students, hey, if you've got a family recipe and there was communication involved, include that. Again, going back to Lindy, she talks about listening when her mom cooked, and then she included, thank goodness for this, she included the recipe as well. A lot of students started doing that. They thought it was pretty cool. And then Cece, who is actually going into teaching English as a second language, which is one of my loves, she did a great one looking at language, idioms, language, and cultures. And then again, she went above and beyond. Body language is a key to learning a foreign language, referring back to LibreTexts. And so I wish you your own student success story, thanks to LibreTexts. If you would like to contact me, I am more than happy to share with you the Google Docs of the instructions for both the 3R essays and as well with the e-zine. And if you want any examples, I could share a few more examples. A lot of my students gave me permission to share it with others. And so I think I'll end on that note. And you know what? For a speech teacher, I'm right on time. Thank you, everybody.